Hey, welcome to CryptoBeast. For episode 3, I thought we'd do something a little bit different than normal, and I'll introduce myself and tell you my story. So, my name is Steve Outtrim, and I was born in Wellington, New Zealand, all the way back in 1973. And my dad was a wing commander in the Air Force. He was in charge of logistics for the New Zealand Air Force, and my mum was a school teacher. So I grew up in the early part of my life living on military bases. We lived in England for a few years and went to university pretty young. I actually turned 17 2 days before the start of my university career, and I got a business degree in 3 years and moved to Australia to seek my fortune. I always wanted to be rich, and we were living in Harrogate in Yorkshire. I was probably 7 or 8 years old, and my dad worked at the nearby military base. It wasn't a particularly flash area or anything. We never had a lot of money in my family as kids, but I came home one day and there was the nicest car I'd ever seen parked in the neighbour's driveway. Bright yellow Dodge Charger, I think it was. And I thought that was the most amazing thing we'd ever seen, and I obviously loved the car. And my dad came home and I said, Daddy, why don't we get a car like this? And my dad looked at me, shook his head, he said, well, son, it's because we're not rich. We can't afford a car like that. And so I decided then and there that, when adults always ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, I wanted to be rich. And I wasn't too sure how that would happen for me, but I always believed in it and developed my mind, developed my subconscious, programmed myself to be on a wavelength for success. And when I was about 19, I moved to Australia, to Melbourne, and I worked for a couple of years. I had a plan to start my own business, and I wanted to combine my knowledge and interest in business with what I knew about computers. So I set out to build an accounting program for small business, which today that as something like QuickBooks or maybe MYOB, but this is back in the early days of Windows, 1995, 1994. So there wasn't as much software like that around. I thought this was a good opportunity, and I'd come home from my job every day. I'd stay up late at night programming the software, and I saved up enough money to start my own business, and I went door-to-door marketing the software. And I went into the first store, I said, hey, you want to buy this accounting software? I've just spent 2 years writing it, and it's great for small businesses. And they said, well, we don't have a computer. And I was like, oh, it's a problem. But back then, 1995, a lot of people in Australia didn't have computers. Now, they certainly didn't know what the internet was. So I went in to another business, and I said, hey, do you guys have a computer? And they said, yeah. I'm like, all right, fantastic. I'm going to get a sale now. So would you like to buy this accounting software? And they said, well, that's why we have a computer. Our accountant told us that we should get one so we could interface with their accounting system. And I thought, oh no, I'm kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. If they don't have a computer, they can't buy my software. And if they have one, it's probably so they can do their accounting software. I've just spent 2 years developing something that's a complete waste of my time. What am I going to do? And at this point, I quit my job. I was living on my savings, and that was it. So I wasn't too sure what to do, but I sat down and I brainstormed for an afternoon, and I was surprised to find I had about 4 pages of notes of what else could I do? Just one person in Australia, without a lot of resources or time, what could I put together quickly that could turn into a real business? And I didn't get a particular idea, but one of the things that stood out in these pages of notes was the internet, that I really should do something on the internet because it was going to be a revolution. All these computers all around the world suddenly could communicate with each other, and you could make a product in one country and you could sell it to people in other countries. Like suddenly anyone could be an exporter, and you could export to every country in the world at once. I was very struck by these ideas, but I didn't know what to do. So I decided to just give myself a break and just take a vacation for a week, leave everything behind, not think about stuff, and just do something just for me, just for fun. Well, in those days I was even a bigger computer nerd than I am now, and doing something for me just for fun was actually programming on the computer. And so I decided I wanted to make a web page. I'd heard about these web pages, and I thought it would be great to have a picture of myself and a description of like the bands I was into and where I lived, and a few other points about me. Like basically I invented a MySpace page or a Facebook profile, except that I never actually made that, because what happened was, in trying to build that goal, I found some software that was supposed to help me to create a web page, and I downloaded a couple of programs, and twice it crashed and I lost a whole afternoon's work. And this is supposed to be my vacation when I'm having fun, and I've done 3 hours work and just lost it because the computer crashed. Like, that was very frustrating. I mean, people today are like, what, didn't he have autosave? But this is how old this was. Like, computers didn't have autosave on every application back in these days, So, some of this stuff, if you needed it, you had to build it. And that's what it was like in the early days of the internet. So when the second crash happened, I decided I could do a better job of this myself. So I made my own web authoring tool, and I called it Hot Dog because my nickname is Sauce, short for Steve-O the Sausage Meister is what they called me in college. And that's a story for another day. But I had my company Sausage Software, and I had the domain name sausage.com. And shortly after I launched, Oscar Mayer offered me $1 million for the domain name. I said, well, if you're going to throw in a Wienermobile, I might consider it. But they never got back to me with that. I guess maybe they thought I wasn't being serious. But I actually, to drive across America in a Wienermobile with $1 million, when I was a 22-year-old kid, that was like pretty good option. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So I wrote this program called Hot Dog to help me make a web page. And at the end of it, I put a message up on a discussion board where I'd been asking questions about, technical aspects of how to write HTML, the hypertext markup language, which is the programming language for web pages. And my tool was designed to make it easy to do that. And so I put this message up and said, hey, I've made this. If anyone else has, had the same experiences as me, let me know. I'll send you a copy. You can have a play with it. Maybe you'll find it useful as well. And I went away for the weekend, and actually my girlfriend at the time had won a trip in a radio contest down to Tasmania. So we went to Tasmania, a very beautiful part of the world. It's quite similar visually to New Zealand, where I grew up. And we're at a place called Cradle Mountain Lodge, absolutely spectacular nature, really magical place. And we came back, and I turned my computer on, and it started downloading 26 emails. And at that point, I'd only received maybe 2 or 3 emails in my life outside of like a corporate Ethernet email system. And from the raw internet, these 26 emails, I thought it must have been some error. But it turned out that they were all from different people, and they were from different countries as well. All saying like, yes, please send me this program. I'm trying to make a web page too. The software that's out there is very hard to use. I'll do anything. Can you send the software to me? And so I realized that this actually was what I needed to do. Like, I'd already made something that people wanted. People on the internet were telling me they wanted it. Boom. And so my crowdsourcing began from that very moment. And I was up against Microsoft around the time releasing Windows 95. I was on their beta program, and they would release basically new CDs would be mailed out around the world to 36,000 developers on the beta program, who would then install it, use it, and then give feedback to Microsoft, who process it for the next build. And sometimes multiple builds a day came out like that. Well, I was able to build my software in a day and instantly put it on the internet, email all those people that had been in touch with me, and they could download it and they could give me immediate feedback. And then I could turn around their feedback into a new feature or a bug fix in the software, sometimes the same day that they had provided it to me. And I was amazed about this. I was tripping out about this. This is 1995, June 1995 I'm talking about. But my customers as well were also tripping out because they hadn't had the experience of dealing with a software company where they say, hey, can you put this feature in it? And then the same day, the program that they use every day has that feature in it. But it's possible to do that on the internet today, even more so than it was back in 1995. We had to do a lot of stuff for the first time. And so anyway, I remember one day very clearly where I'd started this thing and I was living off my savings. I was excited about it. I knew it was going to work because more and more emails were pouring in all the time from that initial post. So I eventually got 800 emails in from people by the time the product launched. And it took me 8 weeks from having that initial idea that I'm going to build this thing for fun to launching it on the website with an instruction manual, with a website, with e-commerce, bank account, everything, a fully launched business. And the internet, again, today, it's much faster to launch this type of idea in business online than it was in 1995. But I'd been living off my savings, and the savings were dwindling. And I remember very distinctly one day, I'd go up to the shops every day to buy my lunch, and I couldn't afford a full sandwich, so I'd just buy the minimum chips at the fish and chip shop, just a bag of French fries. And one day I couldn't even do that. I went to the ATM to withdraw $20, and that was the minimum withdrawal, and I only had $18 in the bank, so I couldn't eat that day. And as you can see, I love to eat. That was bad news for me. So I came back home. I was very dejected, and I knew in my refrigerator was just some milk that was past the use by date and a dirty old stick of celery, and I was like, what am I going to do? This is it. This is the moment of total failure. And I think a lot of people in life get to that moment, and that's the moments that define you, whether you just give in, quit, and fail at that moment, or you somehow pick yourself up and have faith and just persistence and determination and just keep going, because it's always darkest before the dawn. And at that time of my life, being down to my last $18, I walked home and I saw sticking out of my letterbox was a large package I'd been waiting for from the bank. And it was what we called a zip-zap machine. In the old days of credit cards, you had a big mechanical machine and you'd get pieces of paper with carbon in them. You'd put it on the machine and you'd go like zip, zip. And that was how receipts were written out. Having that machine meant that I could go and deposit money in the bank. So people have been sending me via unsecured email and via fax, thermal fax machine, rolls of paper of orders with their credit card numbers on it. And sometimes I'd wake up in the morning and the entire living room where this fax machine was would be just covered in paper from these rolls. 800 pages had come through in one night. And this was all people sending their credit card numbers wanting to buy my product, but because I didn't get the bank account resolved yet, I couldn't do anything with it, and people were getting frustrated. So eventually I sat down and I'm writing on pad after pad after pad all the credit card numbers from these people. This is like thinking, oh my God, I've gone from being down to my last $18 to each one of these sales was $29.95, $30 each one. And I found I filled out one whole pad. Oh my God, I opened it again. Filled out another whole pad. I opened it again onto the third pad halfway down. And I'm like, wow, this seems like a lot. And I went and added it up and it was $2,200. And if you've ever been down to your last $18, you probably know how much money $2,200 seems like. Like that seems like all the money in the world. And so I went down to the bank very excited, knowing that, okay, this money is coming. It's probably going to take 30 days or something for me to get it. But at least now that I know it's coming in, I can reach out, friends, family, whoever, anyone. I can show them the statement from the bank, and they'll be able to help me out to tide me over. And I went to the bank and put it in and said, when do I get the money? They said, it'll be cleared in your account within 24 hours. And I just about jumped in the air for joy, like, woohoo! I can eat, I can pay my rent. Wow. Well, the next week came in $3,500 of sales. And then in the next week, $7,500. In the first month, $36,000 of sales came in. In the second month, $87,000 of sales came in. By month 7, we'd already moved out of my house into an office, and out of that office and into another office because we were growing so quickly. I had 45 employees, and I had to buy them a desk, a chair, and a computer, a workstation, and each one of those cost close to $10,000 back in those days. And we had a month where $410,000 came in sales. This is 7 months after my last $18. And after I paid all of the 45 employees, I had $220,000 left over, cash profit in my bank account in a month. And that's the power of the internet. And that's when almost nobody was on the internet, where there were no tools there to help you find success. And today, the whole world is on the internet. There are tools everywhere. Anybody can get on Steemit and just start writing about anything and make money from the internet and be part of this cryptocurrency revolution. So my story goes on and on and on, but from that moment, basically, we were growing so quickly that we started to get some capital difficulties, and I needed to borrow $250,000 to buy a new server in the US. And we were actually next to the Playboy server in a server farm in Sunnyvale, very flash purple silicon graphics box. But our little sausage software hot dog box was doing more than twice the volume of the Playboy server of downloads and data going out. And this is a time where there were very few sites on the internet where people could see boobs. Now you have a look at how much adult content is a percentage of internet traffic today, and the vast volume of that, we were outperforming the Playboy server. And my product, Hot Dog, was the third most downloaded software on the internet in 1996 and 1997, after the Netscape browser and Eudora, the mail program. So anyway, we needed to get the server, and I went to a bank, actually several banks, trying to borrow $250,000, secured against $1 million of computer equipment that I just paid cash for, that I thought was pretty reasonable collateral. And I got on one day, 3 of the 4 banks I applied to called me up and said, I'm sorry, we're not going to give you the loan. And I had a little choice at that time. I'd actually already reached out to the media to go on TV. and people had approached me, and I went to one venture capitalist, and the bank said they wouldn't lend me $250,000. I called him up and I said, you can have 20% of the company for $5 million. And he said, sold. And I was like, fuck, I wish I'd asked for $10 million. But anyway, that turned out to be a very interesting deal. And the mechanics of that deal were to go public and debut on the Australian Stock Exchange, which we did in 1996 in October. And it was 16 months after I'd been down to my last $18. And the first trade came up on this big share board out at the stock exchange, $1.50. And at that point of the shares being $1.50, my stock holding was worth $140 million. So I went from $18 to that in 16 months. It was a hell of a ride. And then over the course of that day, the stock price dropped, and I ended the day with a stock holding worth $90 million. So I learned what it was like to make $100 million in a single day, and in the same day, I learned what it was like to lose $50 million in a single day. And at the end of the day, these things are just numbers. It goes up and down. Your true wealth is your health, your friends, your love, your life, your compassion, your kindness, the energy that you put out towards the world is true wealth. And it's senseless to get too attached to mechanical things and material things. It's important to focus on the true prize, which is all of humanity evolving to a better world and a better place. And we have these amazing tools in front of us that we can use, together to get there together and to help others get there with us. So, later on in the series, I'll probably tell other aspects and details of my story. I could go on about it for hours and hours and hours because a lot more happened than that. But that's a pretty good introduction. I took my company public at 23 as the CEO. I became the youngest CEO of a public company in Australian history, which was a record that Rupert Murdoch had for nearly 50 years. And I had that record for myself probably for 16 years, I think. It's recently was taken by a young guy, 19 years old, who took his company public, and the stock code for that is BIG, if you want to get into it. It's performed spectacularly well, actually. Myself, I'm into cryptocurrency these days, and I'd like to give a shout out to my client, Etherical. They're running a special for the rest of 2017. Use this referral code here on the screen to purchase, and you'll get 30% extra bonus tokens. So Etherical's fantastic. It's a way to get into the new emerging cryptocurrencies at a discounted price to even the ICO price of these currencies. So buy low and sell high is a time-honoured investment philosophy. I hope you'll have a wonderful Christmas and a wonderful New Year, and I'll see you in a new CryptoBeast soon.